Like I said, one thing you can't or you would not be able to take away from Azikiwe would be that he was a fantastic orator. He could speak. He could speak. Right? He was a great speaker. And so that helped the movement. And so it says here, the Nigerian Youth Movement was already popular with the masses before Dr. Azikiwe's return. But he brought with him a propaganda technique which was new in politics and journalism in Nigeria, and which further boosted the popularity of the Nigerian Youth Movement and disarrayed its opponents. Little wonder, therefore, that in opposition to the veteran NNDP, the NYM won in 1938 and in a resounding manner all the 3 Lagos seats in the Legislative Council and all but one of the elective seats in the Lagos Town Council. Just quickly explain that as well. NYM was a youth movement, but it was beyond the youth movement. It was also a political party of some sort. So they presented candidates for elective positions in Lagos. At the time in Nigeria in the 1930s, you could only vote in 2 places, Lagos and Calabar. All right? And even then, they had all these criteria for that, which was also one of the things that NYM wanted to remove. And one of those things was that in order to vote, you had to be a property owner and you had to be earning a particular amount of money per month and above. That was what qualified you to be able to vote. NYM was one of the organizations that moved for universal suffrage, where people could just vote regardless of being in a house in a place or not. If they were living there, that's good enough. That came much later. But in the 20s and the 30s, you had to have a house and you had to make a certain amount of money. All right. Now, NYM also presented candidates just like NNDP, but in 1938 elections, NYM won all 3 seats in the Lagos Legislative Council, and they also won every seat in Lagos Town Council but 1. But apart from the role which he played in these 2 electoral battles, it was Dr. Azikiwe who delivered a succession of blows, now subtle, then hard and heavy, but always accurate and harmful, which, aggravated by a series of bungling and mismanagement on the part of some of its leaders, brought about the fall and the ruin of the NYM. In other words, because Azikiwe had a way with words, he could deliver serious punches, right, and blows, and deal with deal with even his own people. The things he did. So, in other words, the only thing we can credit Azikiwe for doing, and by the way, I'm staying with this book because there are many books that confirm these things, right? You can read Between the Ethnic and the National by Remi Adekoya. You'll find all these things there as well. But I want to read just one book for this session, unless, of course, we want to buttress some points using other books. I don't want us to be distracted so much. That's why I'm reading only one book. But we're not just taking this because Hawo said it. Other books also report the same, the same event or the same thing. In other words, the only thing that we can credit Azikiwe for doing for the NYM was the way he helped with ensuring that they won elections in 1938. And you can't take that away from him. He spoke, he did all of that and all that. Yes. However, beyond that, and this is the crazy part with talented people, the talent that he used to help them win those elections was the same talent he used to ensure the downfall of the party, of the movement. That same tool, Orenu, whether those so I've been to Kosile, the things he said, the things he wrote, they were the things eventually led. Not the only thing, of course, there was mismanagement on the part of some of the leaders of the NYM, but coupled with his own things, his own, Papa called it jabs, or called it blows, succession of blows, coupled with the mismanagement on the part of some of the leaders of NYM. Those 2 things eventually led to the fall and the ruin of NYM. Why did Awolowo say this? Is it just 1 second? Why did Awolowo say this? Is he just talking? No. Something happened in 1938. And what happened in 1938 was that, and I mentioned this, on Monday, Obasanjo Akíntóyè was trying to run for a seat in Lagos Town Council. But certain people were against him. And the people against him were people from his own part of Yoruba land. And they were against him because he was against their own interests as far as they were concerned. So back in the day, they wanted to be very clear that Remo were different from Ijebu people, so that they could have their own sovereignty and have their own identity outside Ijebu and Awujale. So they went to just be Remo. Akisanya was one of those people who supported the Ijebu and said, oh, it doesn't really matter, we're all one, all those things. So when it was time for him to run in Lagos, again, this was in Lagos, the Remo people living in Lagos did not vote for him. And so he lost. So let me just read part of that and then we'll continue. Dr. Azikiwe caused many ears to prick up at the discordant note which he sounded when the campaign for the Lagos Town Council election 1938 was at its peak. Oba Samuel Akisanya was one of the NYM candidates and the only one who lost among them. Most of the Jebu Remo people resident in Lagos were opposed to his candidature because the Odemo had sided with Jebu Ode when the people of Jebu Remo had demanded separation from the latter. The Remo opponents of Oba Akisanya used the Nigerian Daily Times as their medium of attack. 2 or 3 letters to the editor had been published in the paper. Stay with me. This is the first thing that Azikiwe did in 1938. Again, remember the date, 1938. Why is that date important? Because you can't even understand history if you don't get the concept of timelines. Timelines help you to put things in perspective. That's one. Number 2, you also have this thing in recent times where people tell you about, oh, this last election has destroyed Nigeria. We're never, tribal or ethnic or tribalism. It was Tinubu. It was this APC. I'm not APC, but I don't like lies. It was APC that brought it. It was Yoruba people. That's the one. I'm Yoruba, so I can speak. It was Yoruba that brought it. Guess what? Kintoko Ifa that didn't share. Somebody just wrote that. Let me read what this one wrote. It says, this bigot, Awolowo, who saw Nigeria as a mere geographical expression, is never mentioned. Tinubu, who said he doesn't believe in Nigeria, not mentioned. Again, this is how you have a bunch of retards who come here from time to time. Okay, and I won't even remove what you have typed for now because I want to give you this benefit of the doubt. Perhaps if you listen to me for more than 4 minutes, it's going to help you. Afraid. Real quick. Afraid of what? Afraid of stupidity? Nah. If you had known, you should not have written that nonsense. But since you wrote it, let me remove it. But if you write nonsense again, I'll now mute you. Okay? Like I said, some of you, your stupidity is congenital. Like it's passed from generation to generation. So please don't bring it here. May God bless you and keep you. But don't be stupid here. Alright? Anyway, let's concentrate on people that matter. We can leave it there and just play stupid until you become too much for me. Then I can send you to the naughty corner. Okay? God bless you, Junior. Where were we? The first thing we notice is what happened in 1930. Now remember, 1934 was when the Nigerian Youth Movement was formed as Lagos Youth Movement. 1936 was when the name was changed. 1937 was when Zik returned from Ghana and joined the NYM. 1937 was when Zik helped the NYM to canvass for votes, and campaign and do all of those things. And it's important to mention those things. Those were the good things that Zik did in Nigerian Youth Movement. It was very, very useful. But it was also included in the Central Executive Committee as soon as he joined. All right, that's that. Now in 1938, what happened in that election? I mean, every seat was won, but one was lost. That one, I said that 3 seats in the Lagos Legislative Council, all 3 seats were won by NYM. Then in the Lagos Town Council, all the seats in the Lagos Town Council all the seats were won except one. That one seat that was lost was actually the one that Oba Samuel Akisanya was intending to occupy. Now, Oba Akisanya was, I've already mentioned, I want to just go back into it because it's going to help me with my thoughts since this person disturbed me earlier. Oba Samuel Akisanya was a Yoruba man living in Lagos Island, right? Living in Lagos, but he was Remo. Now, being a Remo man, the Remo people, they wanted to Ijebu towns. So you have Ijebu Ode, of course, Ijebu Igbo, Ijebu Mushin, Odogbolu, many of those towns, Ijebu Ife, and so on and so forth. But there's another subgroup, which was now like a subgroup of the subgroup. So Ijebu is the subgroup of Yoruba people. There's another group that traced their own journey to a place called Iremo Quarters in Ile-Ife. That group is called the Remo people. Those Remo people have now become like the subgroup of the Ijebu subgroup. So at some point in their history, they, of course, also have their own capital in Shagam, where you have their Caribou. They then said, you know what, we don't want to be a subgroup of a subgroup. We're actually a subgroup in our own right? So we're going to just be Remo. Now, those Remo people are the ones people like places like Shagamu, Ilishan, Ikperu, Ikene, those are Remo towns, and so on and so forth. So they wanted to have their own, stuff. Now, at that time, the people wanted kind of separation. And what that means basically is this. The king in the capital is a king over all the towns, or is a paramount king over all the towns within that subgroup. All right. So the paramount king of Ijebu people till today is the Aujale. So if the Remo people were under the Ijebu, that means that they are also under the suzerainty of the Aujale. But they wanted to have their own, because they also have their own head, who is their Caribou, but they have many other kings. All right. So that point, they were now saying, we want to be Remo, But Samuel Akíntóyè supported Ijebu. Like Ijebu should still be the capital. They should be called Ijebu, and so on and so forth. And because of that, his own people in Lagos, campaigned against him, because it was against the interests of the majority. Therefore, he lost. Now, while they were campaigning, one incident happened in the Nigerian Daily Times. There was a man, the editor, called Bates, Mr. Bates. Mr. Bates had published that people are writing about, he was publishing letters by people against the candidature of Samuel Akíntóyè. And in one of those editorials, he mentioned that he has a flood of letters against Akíntóyè. Stay with me, please. Against the candidature of Akíntóyè. He talked about having a flood of letters. So when he said that, when you say a flood of letters are poured into my office about this particular person, which means a lot of people are against his candidature, which of course led to the loss eventually. But one of the leaders of NYM, Chief H.O. Davis, decided to go visit the Nigerian Daily Times office to talk to Mr. Bates. When he got to Mr. Bates, he asked him, please, can you show me this flood of letters that you have received from all over Lagos which of course you recorded, you published in your paper. You said you had received a flood of letters pouring in. So may I see the flood of letters? And excuse me. Excuse me. So he asked for the flood of letters, and Mr. Bates, according to Papa here, was embarrassed. He had no flood of letters. He had just about 2 or 3 letters. And so it was like, is this all you had? And you're saying that the whole world is against Akíntóyè and all of those things. Anyway, they had this conversation, and that was it. The next day, Bates published his own paper. Now, Bates was already having a problem with Azikiwe. Why? They were rivals. Azikiwe was the editor and publisher of West African Pilot. Bates was the editor of the Nigerian Daily Times. Bates then used the opportunity that, now wrote in his paper on the next day that H.O. Davis came visiting, but he didn't tell why he visited. He didn't talk about the purpose of the visit. He just talked about the fact that he visited. When the paper came out, now H.O. Davis, Ernest Zikoli, the Oba Samuel Akíntóyè that we're talking about, and Dr. Azikiwe, who owned West African Pilot, were all members of NYM, including Awolowo. Right? So H.O. Davis, being a member of NYM, essentially what Bates was doing was to use him to attack his group, like saying, even somebody from your place visited me yesterday, that kind of thing. Now, when the paper came out, H.O. Davis saw the paper and then decided to, provide a rebuttal, so to speak. So he published something in Zeke's own newspaper, the West African Pilot, to talk about the purpose of his visit. Right? Not just the fact that he visited, but why he was there. But regardless of what he did, this is what happened after his own statement was published in Zeke's paper. This is what Zeke did. It says here, in fact, let me read just a bit. Mr. Bates, who because of his conflict with Dr. Azikiwe was an object of detestation in Nigerian circles, tried to exploit Chief H.O. Davis's visit in his own favor. He carried a news item the day after Davis's visit, simply mentioning the fact, but omitting the purpose of the visit. Chief H.O. Davis promptly explained the purpose in a statement published in the West African Pilot. Nevertheless, Dr. Azikiwe wrote an editorial in his paper in which he referred with disapprobation to this visit and described Chief H.O. Davis as a simpleton. That was his comrade. He referred to him as a simpleton. To me, this is Papa now, this is Awolowo. To me, this open abuse and rebuke of a worthy colleague and compare cut very much against the grain. It was quite out of tune with the spirit of comradeship and mutual respect, which was expected to dominate the leadership as well as the followership of the NYM. That was the first thing that he did in 1938 that made people start wondering, are you for us or against us? The next thing he did, I'll say it now. Remember I mentioned how Africanization of the civil service was a major priority for NYM? Do you remember? I'm sure you do. Anyway, the British colonial government balked. And they were like, you know what? You guys have been talking about this thing for so long. Let's do this. We're going to appoint a magistrate who is Nigerian. That name, of course, is Adetokunbo Ademola. We're going to appoint him. Since you guys want Africanization, we want Yoruba people to have, we want black people to be in the civil service, not just, white. Let's have Africans. Okay. We're going to have a new magistrate. The magistrate will be Adetokunbo Ademola. Guess what Zik did in his paper? Now, Adetokunbo Ademola was a member of NYM. NYM was the first nationalist organization. It was an organization that brought everybody together, regardless of their ethnicity or tribes. They didn't think about where they're from. They didn't think about all of those things. They were just focused on the goal of one Nigeria, like we always say now, one Nigeria, one Nigeria, one Nigeria, one Africa. Anyway, a member of that group, Zik, decided to write against another member of the group. That's Adetokunbo Ademola, saying that they should not appoint him because he didn't have the prerequisite experience. Let me read to you how it's detailed, how it's written here. It says here, at another time, Azikiwe created more than a tremor throughout the rank and file of the movement when he wrote editorials in the Pilot calling upon the government not to appoint Sir Adetokunbo and then Mr. Ademola a magistrate, as was then strongly rumored. His ground for this action was that Sir Adetokunbo had not had the statutory post-call experience. But guess what? Regardless of the fact that he used his paper to go against his own comrade, the British government still appointed Adetokunbo Ademola as a magistrate. But guess what Zik did? He wrote against that again. Let me read that to you. When the appointment was in fact made, he criticized it on the same ground. This act of his was in diametric opposition to the movement's policy of Africanization of the civil service and the judiciary. In other words, you're talking to a man who doesn't really care about the goal of the organization. Let me pause to say something here. The folks who insult Azikiwe whenever I speak about the good things he did and tell us that he's a terrible person, they should cancel him and everything, are suddenly insulting me for highlighting the terrible things he did because he is Igbo. In other words, when I talk about the good that he did, they will tell me that he didn't do anything good. And the reason they say this is not because he didn't do anything good, it's because he stopped believing in Biafra. Azikiwe actually supported Biafra in the beginning before he changed his mind. So whenever I talk about the good, which I have done here by the way, whenever I talk about the good that Azikiwe has done, these people counter me by mentioning that they hate him, they don't want him, and the reason, of course, is not because he was a bad person. It's essentially because he stopped believing in Biafra. Now that I'm talking about his historical antecedents, they come here to tell you that he's such a great man. Why? Because he's Igbo. It tells you how dumb certain people are, and I'm not going to say more than that. And you guys know exactly who you are, and you have been disturbing me. You're not very smart. You're not dumb, but you're not very smart. Take your pick your choose your choice. Let's go on. By the end of August, this is a very important paragraph, by the way, I'm about to read. Again, I'm reading How the autobiography of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. You can find this book on Read Me Books on Telegram.